very happy to be meeting with Prime Minister spokesman Mark Regev, sitting here in a busy Jerusalem coffee shop, and a somewhat noisy one. Thank you very much for speaking to me. What would you say are the biggest challenges right now that you have, being the Prime Minister spokesman for Israel?
Look, the number one challenge facing Israel and the world is Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons. And I think it's important not to beat around the bush. The Iranians want nuclear weapons. There's not a question here.
Right.
They can claim until tomorrow that they want nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, but you look at their program, it's clear they want nuclear weapons. Anyone who doesn't understand that is deluding themselves, and it's dangerous to delude yourself. It's crucial as we move forward that we prevent them from getting nuclear weapons, preferably diplomatically. Right? If it's possible to get a final deal with the Iranians that actually dismantles their military nuclear program, that's a good scenario. That's the preferred scenario. But as the Prime Minister has said, and frankly as President Obama has said, right, they won't be allowed to get a nuclear weapon one way or another, and all options are on the table.
What's the official position regarding the Geneva agreement, or potential Geneva agreement?
Well, as you know, we had our criticisms, but now we're looking forward at the long-term agreement. Look, Iran says that they want nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. So leave aside the fact that they've got enough fossil fuels, natural gas and oil for the next 2 centuries. They say they want nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Fine. There are some 20 countries on this planet that have nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. The United States has 2 neighbors, Mexico and Canada, that have nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Neither of them have nuclear enrichment centrifuges.
Right.
Neither of them have plutonium-producing heavy water reactors. The Iranians demand the right to have both enrichment and to have a heavy water reactor that can produce plutonium. You need neither for a peaceful nuclear program. Why do they demand that? Because their program is not benign. They want a bomb. And what has to be achieved is we have to eliminate their ability to cross the nuclear threshold. And we don't want them sitting on the threshold and they will make a decision by themselves when's the best time for them to cross the threshold. We want to eliminate their capability to cross the threshold.
In the Israeli government's opinion, does the Geneva Agreement give them the rights to enrich fuel? I read it that way. I'm just wondering whether that's whether Israel reads it that way.
It allows them to continue low rate enrichment.
Right.
And on the face of it, you say that's good. They're only going to be enriching at a low rate. The problem is, the Iranians over the last year and a bit have greatly expanded both the quantity of centrifuges they've got running. I think they've got close to 2,000 today. And the quality of the centrifuges they have available. They've got these 2nd and 3rd generation centrifuges, so they can today enrich a lot more and a lot faster, which means they can theoretically jump from low level enrichment to weapons grade enrichment in weeks.
Yes.
And we can't afford to let them do that, and that's why we say we have to eliminate their enrichment capability.
Right. I mean, and the answer that the U.S. would give for something like that is that yes, but it adds more IAEA oversight over the enrichment. So what's the answer to that?
We don't want. Israel doesn't believe in oversight of enrichment. We want to see the end of enrichment. Once again, there are some 20 countries on this planet that have peaceful nuclear programs that do not have nuclear enrichment.
Right.
Why should Iran have nuclear enrichment? And this isn't what Israel says. This is a whole series of UN Security Council resolutions say the Iranians should not be enriching uranium.
What do you think are Israel's challenges from a public relations perspective right now?
I think there's, sometimes you can get the impression by reading some articles out there that the biggest threat to peace and security on the planet is those Israelis might attack Iran. And that's inverting reality. The biggest threat to peace and security on this planet is that the Iranians actually get a nuclear weapon. And people should not underestimate the danger. Because the danger is very real. It's not just a threat to Israel, it's a threat to the region, it's a threat to the world. Two things I want to stress on this issue. One, when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program, surprise, surprise, there's no Arab-Israeli conflict. The Arab states, our neighbors, agree with us. They're just as concerned. And I would always tell an international audience, if Arabs and Israelis agree, it's time to pay attention. Right. Because it doesn't happen every day. And we and our Arab neighbors no one has illusions about the Iranian nuclear. The second thing that has to be mentioned is that the Iranians are building intercontinental ballistic missiles. They've got a missile development program. They're not building those missiles for Israel. Why? They've already got missiles that can reach Israel. Why are they building intercontinental ballistic missiles? To threaten targets further and further away. Now, you can be naive. You can say, well, what they want these missiles for is to shoot nuclear isotopes into outer space. It's ridiculous. And so I would remind the international community that the Iranians, their aggressive agenda is not just about us. Their aggressive agenda is much more. It might start with Israel, but it doesn't end with Israel. After all, in the Iranian warped theology that the supreme leader has there, Ayatollah Khamenei, we are the little Satan. Right? You've got to remember, who is the big Satan?
The United States.
And what is Europe? A middle-sized Satan.
Right, let's move over to the peace process. There, I saw reported this morning that at least, I don't know why the Arab League is making this announcement. The Arab League said that by the end of this month, John Kerry is going to put forth whether it's a straw man plan, but some sort of a plan. Is this true? I mean, I haven't heard anything from the Israeli side that confirms or denies that. So is this actually what's going on in the peace process?
Listen, it's not my job to speak for the Americans. It's my job to speak for the Israelis.
Right.
So I'm not going to speculate as to what Secretary Kerry might or might not do. What I can tell you is the following. There's a very serious effort on the table to try to get an agreement. The Prime Minister has met I think practically every 2 weeks we meet Secretary Kerry. And every 2 days the two men are on the phone. There's a very serious effort underway to try to get progress in the peace talks, to try to get an agreement. I hope we succeed. But people have to understand that if it's going to work, peace has to be a two-way street. Because if the expectation is just one-side move, Israel, and we are ready to take tough choices for peace, but it's not going to work unless the Palestinians are also. And there are two issues if you want a peace agreement, right, to end the conflict. The Palestinians have to move on two crucial issues. The first issue is the one that you've spoken about a moment ago, which is the whole issue of security. Right. No Israeli government is going to pull out of territory and hope for the best, especially if you look at the region the way it is now. I mean, the region is particularly volatile, very violent. Look what's going on in Syria and in other places, right? We have to have ironclad security arrangements based on Israel's ability to defend itself by itself in any peace agreement. Because a peace that you can't defend just won't continue. The Prime Minister puts it this way. He says, we've got to have security arrangements that can protect the peace. People say, but you've got peace. Why do you need to protect it? If we sign a peace treaty tomorrow with the Palestinians, the White House and the United Nations and the Europeans will all celebrate it. But the Iranians, the Syrians, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the Muslim Brotherhood, they'll all
be upset.
They won't just be upset, that they will, quite possibly you'll get an escalation of violence, right? So you have to be able to protect the peace, and to speak frankly, you also have to be able to protect Israel if peace unravels. And that's why you need ironclad security arrangements in a peace agreement. And the Palestinians have to understand by not dealing seriously with Israel's legitimate security concerns, they're not doing themselves a favor. Because if only by dealing seriously with Israeli security concerns do they make Palestinian statehood possible. So that once again, they do themselves no favor by ignoring the issue, by thinking there's some magic way to avoid the issue. I state and I restate, right? No Israeli government is going to be pulling out of territories without security arrangements. We saw what happened in Gaza. We saw what happened in Lebanon. It's not going to happen in the West Bank. And then the other issue, though, I said there are two issues that have to be for a peace agreement. You asked me about the peace agreement. One issue is that security, and the other issue, which is not less important, is the whole issue of legitimacy. In the framework of the peace talks, we are asked as Israelis to accept that the Palestinian people are entitled to a nation state of their own. Surely we are entitled in the framework of peace for the Palestinians to use the same language when they talk about us and to finally recognize the legitimacy that the Jewish people have a right to a nation state of their own. I mean, that's the fundamental mutual recognition that's required for peace. Unfortunately, the Palestinians aren't there yet. Palestinians are unwilling to cross that Rubicon. The Palestinians are not willing to accept even that there's a Jewish people sometimes, let alone that we have a historic connection to this land, let alone that we're entitled to national self-determination in even a part of our homeland. And once again, without that legitimacy, what sort of peace is there? It's not the end of conflict. And here I'm going to say something that people don't necessarily understand. Israel is open to Palestinian statehood if it's ending the conflict. But if a Palestinian statehood is merely a superior vehicle, a superior platform to continue the conflict, we're not interested. And therefore peace has to be a real peace, it has to be end of conflict. We have to hear from the Palestinians finally that the Jewish people have a right to their national self-determination. And that is an integral element of a peace agreement.
The Prime Minister has said in the past that one of his requirements for any future peace agreement would be a demilitarized Palestinian state. Today, Abbas said that's never going to happen. He does not accept that. So is this still a firm requirement on the Prime Minister's side?
The formula the Prime Minister uses, he sums it all up. He says the formula is a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. That's the formula for peace. Now the Palestinians, once again, Israel, if there's going to be peace, we know we'll have to take some tough choices. But it has to be a two-way street. And Palestinians, if the Palestinians aren't willing to take tough choices, they're not going to get a state. Let me put it this way. If the Palestinians don't want to do any tough choices, they can go to the UN and they'll get these massive votes, and they'll have so-called diplomatic victory after diplomatic victory. But what changes? Nothing. They'll have a party in Ramallah celebrating their big victory at the United Nations, and when they wake up the next morning, nothing has changed. The only way to change reality is through direct talks with Israel, through peace talks, and in peace talks there have to be give and take. And Palestinians have to come to the table. They have to give up the so-called right of return. They have to be able to say that we recognize the legitimacy. What's the fundamental problem with the Palestinians? Is that they're not willing even to say this, that we recognize a Jewish state in any borders. You've got to remember, if you speak superficially to people, people say, why is there a conflict? There's a conflict because the Palestinians don't have a country of their own, because they don't have a state. A lot of people will tell you that. But that ignores the fact that over history, the Palestinians have been offered a Palestinian state many times. It goes back to the 1930s, the Peel, Peel proposals. Then in 1947, then fast forward, Barak at Camp David, Olmert at Annapolis, Netanyahu, Bar Ilan, 2 states for 2 peoples. What has their problem been? They've refused to accept a Palestinian state when it meant correspondingly accepting the legitimacy of the Jewish state. Now there's a fundamental flaw here, so the real reason we've got a conflict isn't because of a Palestinian state. We're ready for that. The problem has been their unwillingness to accept the Jewish state.
What they've been doing, what I've seen them doing lately in order to get around that is they say they accept the state of, the Israeli people. They wouldn't say the Jewish people.
They say it's semantics, it doesn't matter. So if it's semantics and it doesn't matter, why do they have such a problem saying it?
Right. Exactly. Also, I mean, again, I think this is a little smart, but obviously I'm coming from a perspective where I'm far more pessimistic of anything really happening, and I hope that Israel sticks to its position. Abbas has bragged that he has not changed his position one iota since 1988, since Arafat's declaration of independence in 1988, that he hasn't done anything at all change. And as far as I can tell, he hasn't. I haven't seen any real change on the ground as far as their position is concerned. So I mean, again, I don't know how privy you are to the actual secret talks. Has there been any change that's visible in the Palestinian position?
On those two important things that I mentioned, I'm not aware at this time that there's been any breakthrough.
Okay.
But we have to keep at it. We have to keep trying. Ultimately, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
And the Palestinians are not going anywhere. So we have to keep trying to find a way to live together more peacefully.
Right.
But I want to say something that needs to be said also on that issue. People say to me, it's also almost part of conventional wisdom, that a Palestinian state is in Israel's interest. Right? You know, you want to stay a Jewish democratic state, you have to agree to a Palestinian state. And it's true, but it's only true if it's a Palestinian state that lives in peace with Israel.
Sure.
If you have a Palestinian state that looks like Gaza, is that possible? Fortunately, it is.
Yeah, sure.
A Palestinian state that looks like Syria, a Palestinian state that looks like Iran, a Palestinian state that looks like Lebanon. Is that in Israel's interest? A Palestinian state that looks like Somalia? In other words, a Palestinian state that lives in peace with Israel, that's in Israel's interest.
Right.
But just to say a Palestinian state, no.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that a Palestinian state is actually going to be a Palestinian state that lives in peace? You have to have both legitimacy and you have to have the security arrangements. You can't take them away.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's long enough. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
With all the noise, that works?
I'm sure it'll be fine.
We'll try to get it to work.